walking humbly with God. I won't walk you through the entire story, but in Matthew, the 14th chapter, we find undoubtedly what you've heard preached probably a dozen times. It's probably one of the most preached passages. Wonderful. In Matthew 14:22, I don't know if you remember the story, but it's where Jesus walks on water, and he encourages Peter to walk on water as well. I will read it. Matthew 14:22. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him. Crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray, and when it was evening, he was there alone, but the boat was already a long distance from the land. You know why the boat was so far away? Because it was battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. It was stormy. The wind was blowing. He came to his disciples walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw Jesus walking on the sea, they were terrified. And they said, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus' courage, "It is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter said to him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And it was Jesus, and so he said, "Come." On the water, and he came towards Jesus. He literally walked on water. But this is it. This is like a pastor's dream verse in this sermon. He sees the wind. Verse 30. He sees the wind, and he became frightened. He sees the wind, and he became frightened, and he began to sink. And he cried out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand, and he took hold of him and said to him, "You of little faith, why do you doubt?" And when they got in the... It's an easy application. I want you to think of it for a minute. We don't have a lot of time. I want you to think of this for a minute. We've talked about two things. There's going to be a third. One thing we said is God is in control. I promise you to be good. 3, we think of verses like Matthew 14, where Jesus commands his disciple to get out and walk on the water. And the disciple is doing what Jesus has called him to do until when, and think of it 100 times over, he walks on water until he takes his eyes off of Jesus. He puts his eyes on the storm. And when he puts his eyes on the storm, he sinks. He sinks. Now, I don't know if you remember all the passages we've looked at in the past, but we looked at passages like in referring to the lilies of the field. Consider the lilies. I don't know if you remember that passage, the Consider the Lilies passage. But one of the things we said in the Consider the Lilies passage is in Matthew 6:25, where Jesus says, "I don't want you to be worried about your life, what you're going to eat or what you're going to drink. Don't worry about your body. Don't worry about what you're going to put on. Is life not more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air." And at the end of the passage, what does he say? I don't know if you remember, but he says in Matthew chapter 6, "First the kingdom of God." Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be provided to you. One of the applications from that passage, and I want you to think in regards to conflict, in regards to strife, in regards to drama, in regards to the world falling apart around you. One of the applications we had of this, in the midst of trouble, in the midst of drama, what can you do? You must seek Jesus and seek the face of God. Seek his face. I remember it was a couple years ago telling you that thing, is that we really struggle to give advice when people are suffering. We don't know what to say when bad things happen. One of the things we can always tell them is right now, in the midst of whatever you're going through, seek Jesus Christ. Pursue him. Seek after him. Seek after him spiritually. Don't take your eyes off Jesus. Don't take your eyes off Jesus. When we take our eyes off of Matthew 6, our eyes are drawn to the problem. And when our eyes become drawn to the problem, what we begin to do is we begin to question God's faithfulness. And when we begin to question God's faithfulness to us, and listen, you don't cry out to people you don't trust. You don't. You've got a plumber at work. Not at work, it's a plumber we call. And once he pierced a line, and the other time he got a snake caught, and he ripped through about 6 inches of pipe. And he put everything in him, any good plumber could find. David Neal would never do anything like this. This guy does. So when we call the plumbing folks, we tell them we don't want this guy back. Why do we not want him back? Because we don't trust him. And you don't call upon who you don't trust, right?